Shaniece Sturdy, 21, had made the decision to become a surrogate, but this was not expected. From the monitor, Shaniece turned to look at her protruding belly. She sensed that something was wrong because she had gotten huge during the second trimester. She had a constant urge to eat, her back hurt all the time, and she never felt well. The nurse applied lubricant to her skin while pressing a device on her tummy. "These symptoms are absolutely normal in the first pregnancy," she told him. He turned back to the monitor, anxiously awaiting the news. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice shaking. The nurse did not have time to answer. She had to call a doctor immediately. Shaniece wanted nothing more than to be a mother. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Her parents had been together for decades and her sister had married her high school sweetheart as soon as she could. She wanted to follow in her footsteps, but she had no idea that her marriage would bring her so much suffering so soon. Linda left the family home to live with her partner when Shaniece was just 14 years old. She believed that having more personal space would make her life easier. However, the house was cold and lonely. He even missed his silly arguments. They still saw each other on the weekends, but it was clear they were growing apart. She didn't want this to happen, so she got on the first bus to visit her older sister. But she did not expect to find her in that state. Shaniece picked up her bags and got off the bus. As she was driving to her sister's house, she saw her sister's husband's red pickup truck speeding toward her. She gave him a smile and a wave, but he didn't even recognize her. He was a kind man, but I had never seen such a terrifying look on his face. A chill ran down his spine. What was happening? Josh hadn't even realized she was there. Maybe he was distracted or stressed by problems at work. She decided to let her strange behavior go and headed to her sister's house. She finally came to her, but when she saw her sister, her heart sank at her feet. Linda had puffy cheeks and red eyes. It was evident that she had been crying. She grabbed her sister's hand and asked, "Has she hurt you?" Before Linda could reply, she ran into the kitchen to wipe her sister's face. Her sister looked at her and whispered, "No, don't be silly. I asked him to leave." Shaniece stepped back so she could get a look at her sister. She knew her sister exceptionally well and could easily tell if she was lying or not. However, she was being honest. Perhaps it had been a mistake to marry at such a young age. "Why did you ask him to leave, Linda?" she asked him. However, she was not prepared for a response. "You know, we've been trying for a year," Shaniece, her sister, shared, her voice shaking. "He wants to ask for another loan for IVF, but we can't afford it. We couldn't afford the first treatment." She could see that her sister was desperate. Linda wiped her face and sighed deeply. "We can't go on like this." Shaniece's heart ached. She had never seen her sister so upset with her. And she knew that she would never be happy if she didn't have a child. So he put the kennel on, got a blanket, and stayed with it for the weekend. And during that time, he convinced her to try again. But he never expected his words of encouragement to have such an impact. It took almost 2 years of treatment, but finally, Linda got pregnant. She wanted to keep it a secret until she reached her second trimester, but unfortunately, the pregnancy could not take place. After her abortion, she did not want to try again. But then, she changed her mind. She closed in on herself, and despite Shaniece's best attempts, Linda didn't leave the house for a month. But her husband had one last idea to give her what she had always dreamed of. Josh's idea was unorthodox, but it was Linda's last chance for happiness. The shock of the miscarriage was still fresh in her mind, and she was no longer sure of anything. But Josh's idea gave her hope. Linda and Josh were going to try to convince Josh's sister to make a huge sacrifice. But would she agree? Only time would she tell her. So Josh invited her over to the house to ask her the big question. They sat across the table from Josh's sister. They were nervous. Would she accept? All of Linda's hopes hung on what Josh's sister said next. But Linda would understand if he refused. After all, asking someone for something like that was something very big. Then she looked up and said the 2 words they had never expected. "I will do it." As soon as the words were out of Josh's sister's mouth, Linda felt her fear and nerves slip away. She could finally dream of having a child of her own. She couldn't thank Josh's sister enough. Josh had suggested that his own sister act as a surrogate for his son. She would provide the surrogate for her baby. But Shaniece never expected to be so inspired by the young woman's act of kindness. Had the woman thought it through, it wouldn't be easy, but she had accepted. What Shaniece didn't know was that Josh's sister would inspire her for years to come. Josh's sister offered to carry their child. Understandably, Linda was hesitant. She didn't want to get her hopes up again. But what was the harm in trying one last time? If it didn't work, they could look into fostering. There were plenty of children in need of a good home. Shaniece prayed every night for the pregnancy to take. Then, a miracle happened. When Josh's sister gave birth, Shaniece cried for hours. She had never been so happy. If anyone deserved to be a mother, it was Linda. Then, she made a promise to herself. Shaniece swore then that someday she too would make someone's dream come true. But when that day finally came, she never expected her experience to be so unique. Shaniece had just turned 21 when she met Joanna and Steve. And when she informed her family of her decision to give birth to another couple's baby, they were filled with pride. She flew to Los Angeles to undergo the procedure and then returned home. But things didn't go as she had hoped. I was only 21 at the time, but I wasn't interested in partying and drinking. I wanted to help another couple fulfill their family dream. Joanna and Steve were over the moon. However, after the first trimester, she knew something was off, and she was right. The only other surrogate Shaniece had met Josh's sister, who worked through sickness, nausea, and sleep deprivation until she was nearly 8 months pregnant. Shaniece was lucky, but still she couldn't help but worry. Pregnancy didn't have any impact on her daily life. However, when she noticed that her stomach continued to bulge throughout her second trimester, she worried. Babies rose tremendously during the final months of pregnancy. She picked up her phone and called her doctor. Shaniece had just finished her second trimester when she visited the doctor for her 10-week scan. She twiddled her thumbs above her bump as she lay on the table. When the doctor returned with the paperwork, he was silent. Was something wrong? Was the baby okay? She would never forgive herself that she let Joanna and Steve down. Then the doctor looked up from his notes and said 3 words that sent a chill down her spine. "You're having triplets," Dr. Ryan shared with a smile on his face. Shaniece's temperature increased. Joanna and Steve wanted 1 baby, not 3. Would they be happy? Would they be mad? Thankfully, the couple was overjoyed. As weeks passed, Shaniece's stomach swelled to a ginormous size. Her body ached, but she knew she was doing the right thing. But she didn't anticipate this. Shaniece eventually gave birth to 3 healthy babies, 2 girls and 1 boy, Willow, Daisy, and Harrison. Even though I was only 21, and it was a huge responsibility carrying their babies, it was one of the best experiences of my life, she happily proclaimed. I had no morning sickness or cravings. The whole pregnancy flew by, and with the support of Joanna and Steve, it was amazing, and I would recommend it to anyone, she later shared. But she didn't say goodbye forever. After 2 weeks of intensive care, Willow, Daisy, and Harrison were strong enough to go home for the first time with their parents. Shaniece now visits them every birthday, and for those who have questioned her motives, she'd shed some light on her decision. I think a lot of people presume you have to use your own eggs when you're a surrogate, but that's not the case at all. I had Joanna and Steve's embryo inserted in Los Angeles, so it's biologically their child, not mine. I was just the host womb. But carrying someone else's babies can also have more than psychological implications, and carrying triplets can have a negative impact on a woman's body, especially on a mother so young. And Shaniece started to experience them. I'm in a relationship now and would like to have more children. I've had a miscarriage, so I do wonder if carrying the triplets has had an effect on my body, she said later in an interview. But she also shared some other advice. My advice for anyone thinking about surrogacy is to make sure you've done your research and that you have support around you, Shaniece shared. But there are other considerations too. You don't get paid to be a surrogate. You only get expenses for your travel and so on. So if you're looking to make money, this isn't for you, Shaniece added. Shaniece's experience of being a surrogate mother has inspired her to try to change current laws regarding surrogacy in the UK. She feels like parents should have more control. She says, "Throughout the pregnancy, I had all the questions about the babies directed at me, for example, birth plans, vaccinations, scan dates. I would just turn to Joanna and Steve and say, What do you want to do? It was my body, but they weren't my babies. If the law could change so the parents could make the decisions, it would make things easier on both parts, she added. Many surrogate mothers feel the same way too. In order to protect the privacy of those depicted, some names, locations, and identifying characteristics have been changed and are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblances to actual events or places or persons, living or dead, are entirely coincidental.